Good afternoon, and welcome to today's CACOR seminar on proliferation of outdoor lighting. This with a question mark, in fact. And this is a talk by Robert Dick, who has been involved in lighting and particularly outdoor evening time lighting for many years. In fact, this is the first time I've introduced somebody that I've known as long as I've known Rob Dick. We both met at the Dominion Observatory as teenagers and have our careers actually kind of started there with the passion for astronomy, and we've gone in different directions, but it all started at the observatory, and we've known each other then since the late 1960s. So I will introduce Rob now as his expertise to this top. He became seriously interested in night sky light pollution as a result of moving an observatory. And he'll probably talk to you a little bit about that. But that's really what got him into it in a scientific, technical sense. Rob is an engineer by profession. He studied engineering at the master's level at Carleton University. And Rob has been very active in the Royal Astronomical Society, or RASC, of Canada for many years. He's held various positions in its management team. And he also designed and taught astronomy course, introductory astronomy at Carleton University, also for many years. So he might have some comment about that. But today he's going to talk about it in the context of his work on lighting at night, the world of night. The World at Night is a book that he co-authored under the International Union of Conservation of Nature. You've got a reference to that in the linked material that came out with the notice of this meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rob, to give us an insight into your passion about the night sky and the pollution that we create with light. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. My presentation will essentially segue through a number of topics, and I apologize for this in advance, but lighting is a rather complicated subject. I'll start with a bit of context relating humans to the natural world and the evolution of our relationship with light over the ages. Of course, we can't ignore the recent evolution or revolution in lighting with LEDs and their benefits. Since the topic is about light and light helps us see, I'll discuss how our vision works. Finally, I'll start to address the main subject of this talk with the proliferation of light. By putting these topics together, I hope you'll understand why this subject should raise more public concern than it currently does. I'll be referring to light pollution. Not all light results in light pollution, though it may still be a nuisance to some people. Light pollution is light that doesn't provide a benefit, and it can generally either be direct light, which we see as glare, or scattered light from the surface, or dust and aerosols in our atmosphere, which we see as sky glow. For centuries, we've known about extinction of species. It's a natural process that and the consequence of evolution as described by Wallace and Darwin back in the 1800s. In 1994, Dr. Stephen Gould wrote that following the Cambrian explosion about 500 million years ago, the tree of life has been dropping its less adaptable branches. Indeed, extinctions are an ongoing process, and failure to adapt to change is an important cause of these extinctions. Environmental change doesn't necessarily lead to extinctions. In fact, changing conditions can drive evolution. However, if change occurs more rapidly than species can adapt, then extinctions is probably the most probable outcome. The species we see today, overshot. The species we see today are really well adapted to their niche. They blend in. We can have hot, humid ecosystems or cold, dry ones, and they can all have a balanced ecosystem. Species multiply in number until a balance is reached between the availability and consumption of food and other resources. There's always a bit of tension between the species, which leads to the cyclic change of feast and famine in the ecosystem. but no change to habitat is, but to change any part of these habitats it's to disrupt this balance. More abrupt changes from a forest fire or hurricane, for example, will cause tension between species. These can result in short-term migrations to unaffected neighboring regions until the damaged environment mends. Then species will then repopulate the affected region and new balances are made as the ecosystem is reestablished. A major change that we make to the environment is lighting the night and turning night into twilight. And this is happening literally overnight as new lights are installed in rural and even wilderness areas and then turned on the next evening. Human beings or human biology is no different from that of other mammals, and genetically, we remain hunter-gatherers. And although humans are able to abstract real-world concepts, we're still driven and controlled by our basic instincts. We are still hunter-gatherers mentally as well. Long ago, humans evolved to be scared of the dark, and so we remain. But there's a good reason for this tumor noctis, or fear of the night. The life of a hunter-gatherer is very dangerous. Humans are not strong. We, or at least most of us, can't run very fast, and we make a very tasty meal for any one of the many predators out there. There are predators during the day, but also a different set of predators at night. During the day, vigilance is needed, keen eyesight. At night, some eyesight is necessary to detect movement in the shadows, but low light sensitivity is more important than visual acuity. Satisfying both day and night vision requirements has resulted in rather complex structure in our eyes, and it's forged a marriage between our eyes and different areas of our brain. Also, our critical physical requirements during the day has resulted in deferring other biological processes into the night. This has led to further complexity and resulted in a naive perception of what our eyes do. They're not just for seeing. Humans are one of the very few species that are able to change their environment to suit their personal needs. Our fear of the night and our technical prowess has led to the illumination of the night using artificial lighting. This began with fire 200,000 to 50,000 years ago. However, campfires had relatively benign effect on our night. The temperature of burning wood is typically less than 900 kelvins or 600 centigrade, which emits most of its energy as heat. Very little energy is actually emitted as visible light, and almost no energy is emitted in the blue part of the spectrum, which is less than 0.5 microns. So remember this for later in this talk. But humans could do better, and they did in the 1800s. By burning gas, we're able to raise the temperature of the flame to over 2000 kelvins, with the spectrum peaking at about 1.3 microns. Still, very little light of this light is emitted in the blue. These quantum changes in fuel dramatically reduce the cost of lighting, as shown in this slide. Shown in this slide. So it's zeroed in on the United Kingdom. You can see this really the stepwise changes from one fuel to another until we finally get to the idea of energy when we're using electric light. But things change when we step beyond burning things to powering things with electricity. Running electricity through a tungsten filament raises its temperature to almost 3000 kelvins. Embellishing the light into a halogen cycle increases this further to around 3500 kelvins. This is more than triples the amount of emitted light, but still most of the light emissions are still in the infrared that we can't see. Now, for efficiency, the goal is to emit more light in the visual part of the spectrum. Unfortunately, lamps that are based on thermal emission can't do this. So lighting engineers change their perspective from the statistical emission of light with a hot filament to something more spectrally focused. Engineers selected gases that, when energized with electricity, emitted light between 0.4 and 0.7 microns, the visual part of the spectrum. These lamps use mercury, high pressure sodium, or metal halide vapors. However, these techniques can't produce light that matches the familiar light of our sun. These spiky emission lines in their spectra can't illuminate all colors equally. So the colors they render can't be the same as those rendered under daylight. So engineers had to think a little more and enter LEDs. Light emitting diodes, or LED lamps, are the latest technology, and they're fundamentally different. They aren't based on heating a surface to glow or exciting gases to fluoresce. In fact, LEDs prefer to run cold. They emit light based upon solid-state physics of semiconductors. LED lamps consist of two parts or layers. Whoops. Overshooting. Sorry about that. LED lamps consist of two parts or layers in solid state, a solid state diode and a phosphor coating. The high efficiency diode emits light at 0.46 microns, appearing roughly as royal blue. This color isn't very useful, but coating the emitter with a particular phosphor made from yttrium, aluminum, and garnet converts this blue light, actually absorbs this blue light and re-emits it at longer wavelengths between roughly 0.5 and 0.7 microns. To our eyes, this looks like amber light. Indeed, at low intensities, it resembles the color of candlelight. And coincidentally, by letting a bit of the blue light leak through the phosphor, the amber plus blue appears white. Letting more blue light to mix with the amber varies the light from amber through warm white to a hotter shades of white. LEDs are a fantastic product. They're like, they use low and safe voltage. They emit up to 6 times more light per watt than an incandescent bulb. They're cheap to make in large quantities, at least, and they're durable and long lasting. With technical advances over the last 25 years, they're about as good as they're going to get. Most commercial LEDs have efficacies about 30% better than fluorescent lamps and high pressure sodium lamps, and 10 times better than the older incandescent lamps. Modern LEDs emit 76% of the electrical energy as visible light, compared to only 5% for incandescent lamps and less than 25 years ago. Over the past quarter century, LEDs were introduced and now have taken over the lighting industry. A very quick maturation time. These are all notable benefits, but you don't get something for nothing, and herein lies the problem, and Jevons paradox. In 1965, William Jevons observed that when coal was mined, transported, and burned more efficiently and cheaply, its use didn't lower the cost of energy, or the energy bills, I should say. Rather than harvesting the benefits of these technologies, users took advantage of these savings by burning more coal, and the lower cost enabled more uses. Consumption increased, resulting in higher costs than before they even began making those efficiencies. This counterintuitive result happened with earlier technological advances and is being repeated in our LED revolution. Artificial light at night, or ALAN or ALAN, has transformed our society. It extends our lifestyle, industry, commercial, municipal, and even personal activities into the night. And it can be argued that this has contributed to the prosperity over the last century. Jevons paradox applies to the use of LED lighting and explains why there's been such a rapid growth in power used for outdoor lighting over the past 15 years or so, even though we could have been reducing the power used for light. Installing more light fixtures has caused the increase in outdoor lighting. This is increased due to its relatively low costs, and this fuels the demand for more rural lighting and opulent urban lighting displays. We can use Earth sensing satellites to monitor the increasing light at night. On average, over the second half of the 20th century, we spend about 0.6% of our gross national product on outdoor lighting. More recently, the increase in lighting has grown to over 2% per year. Increases in Canada are about half this, but our rural areas are brightening at 1% per year. In other words, more lights are being installed in the countryside where previously it would have been too expensive. And since LEDs use much less power than previous technologies, LEDs can be left on all night long, or in many cases, they're left on 24 hours a day. In this particular slide in Canada, on the right, on the left-hand side, you'll see a particularly bright or red area, and this is due to the opening of an open pit mine near Thompson. Now, it looks like the open pit mine is an enormous structure, but actually the lights are installed around the edge of the mine, and the floodlighting extends out far beyond the extent of the mine. If the lights were installed inside the pit, then the light pollution from that mine would be much, much less. Why would we do this? Emit light, so much light into the sky? Well, unfortunately, it's because we can. It seems to be part of our homocentric culture to change our environment for our personal use. If we take Europe and North America as different cultures, and they are somewhat different, if you visit both, you'll see that there's different uh, things are different. We see a stark contrast. The graph predates the revolution in LEDs, so this is over a long period of time. This difference has occurred. Historically, Europe uses less outdoor light than America. Some countries are now actively further reducing outdoor lighting with late evening dimming and lighting curfews late at night. Whereas in some North American cities, dimming is actually illegal. And outdoor lighting has been viewed as a symbol of safety and a sign of prosperity, and not to be reduced. This light is used to illuminate roadways, commercial buildings, private property, and for advertising. In the past, the general reason for light at night was to just provide safety, security, and aesthetics. So how much light we use depends on how we use it and how we see the light. So that gets us into a little more about the structure of our eye or biology. On the rear surface of our retina, of our eyes, we have two sets of vision cells. They're called descriptively cone cells for our day vision and rod cells for the night vision. Our cones give good resolution and discriminate colors, blue, yellow, and red. These cone cells are concentrated in the center of our vision, and their numbers taper off towards our periphery. This is why we need to stare at fine print to be able to read it. There are no hazards in our world that actually require good sensitivity in blue or good resolution of blue light. Our eyes don't even focus blue light very well, but we also have very few blue sensitive cells. Only 6% of our cones are actually blue sensitive. And this leads to an interesting phenomena for some of us who may have attended rock concerts and other things in the past. Some theater and music presentations may use blue light to illuminate a background, with the main character lit by white or some other color. The blue background will be fuzzy because there aren't enough blue cells to give a sharp image. It gives a bit of a dream-like sense to the scene, which is probably the reason it was done. Although our nighttime rod vision only gives shades of gray, they're up to 1,000 times more sensitive to light than our cone cells. Being so sensitive, clusters of cells, clusters of these rod cells are interconnected like a neural network, a physical neural network, to reduce the false detections, causing low resolution or the grainy image looking like a poorly tuned television set. As twilight slowly fades to night, there's a handoff from our photopic cone vision to our scotopic rod vision. These rod cells dominate the periphery of our vision, so to see faint celestial objects, astronomers don't look directly at the object in the eyepiece. Rather, they look to the side, so the light falls on the more sensitive rods. But we also need to concentrate our attention off axis as well, which requires a bit of practice. However, this is an example of I tried to make a slide look the way the presentation looks. Now, this is a stock image of a presentation, so a lot of manipulation is required, but you get the idea of it resembles similar to what I was witnessing when I went to some plays and some music presentations. You can see the drummer is very fuzzy, whereas the principal singer is quite sharp. However, the most dangerous time for humans was during twilight, after sunset and before sunrise, when both the daytime and nighttime predators were hunting. We had to be much more vigilant. During this time, both our rods and cones contribute to our vision. As our cones became less effective, our rods slowly desaturated from the daytime light and began to take over as our dominant vision. But we still need to remain alert. Fortunately, evolution has provided us with another set of light detectors to keep us alert during this transition period from daytime to night. These cells are located over the inside surface of our retina, yet they detect the blue light. Oops, I guess we'll go back to this one so you can see that. They detect the blue light of twilight. They're not visual cells, and technically these are called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, but that's a bit of a tongue twister, so I just like to call them twilight detectors. When exposed to blue light, these detectors send a signal to our brain, specifically our suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, which is at the base of the brain. This area regulates our uh, sleep-wake cycle, and over time, sensitive functions of our body, time-sensitive functions of our body. They suppress the natural release of hormones that would otherwise occur when it gets dark. Specifically, it suppresses the release of melatonin that would usually prepare us for sleep. Hence, we are able to stay awake under the blue light of twilight. Once twilight ends and the blue light fades below their threshold, melatonin is released. This melatonin, in turn, enables the release of a suite of other hormones that fight disease, infection, and repairs damaged tissue. They also combat incipient cancer cells. They affect our state of mind by reorganizing memory that reduces stress, anxiety, and even dementia symptoms during the day. These energy intense functions that are best done while we sleep, so as not to tax the energy that we require during a strenuous daytime activities. And after learning about this about a decade ago, uh, it changed my perception, because normally most people think that light is only for helping us see. These twilight detectors provide literally life-altering benefits. We've discussed the benefits of LEDs, and what about the problem they cause? Seeing blue light at the wrong time, later at night, will suppress the release of all these beneficial hormones, and this undermines the benefits of our sleep. Why isn't this more widely known? Well, actually, we've probably all felt the short-term effects of this when we stay up too late. We feel terrible the next day. But if exposed to blue light is chronic, or the exposure of blue light is chronic, then our rejuvenation mechanisms will be reduced or disabled accordingly. And the accumulation of these effects can be crippling. They will exacerbate obesity, diabetes. They can accelerate aging. These effects were only discovered in the last few decades. So, and for most of us who are senior citizens, this stuff wasn't well known when we were in school. Excuse me. Get rid of that. Sorry about that interruption. Light at night is a key attribute of our urban life, but who takes advantage of all this lighting? Regardless of what you may have been told, it's relatively few people. Using traffic as a proxy for more general activity, only 1/6 of the population is out and about after rush hour to take advantage of the light. Street lights have been selected to illuminate the streets for rush hour traffic. But three quarters of the year, traffic densities after dark are low, and actually rush hours are in daylight. It's only in the wintertime when rush hours are actually at night. Although only a small percentage of the population are out during the night, most citizens will be affected by the physical and mental health issues because less than a few times the light, because if you have light that's less than a few times that of the full moon, this will suppress the melatonin levels. Now, this becomes much more critical as a senior citizen because our melatonin levels decrease quite a bit over as we get older. People assume that light at night is benign and have no idea that light can have such a biological and ecological impact. Light is still viewed through our homocentric perspective. This light at night may benefit some people, but all the nocturnal life, which is about 60% of all life, have their habitats disrupted by the urban and rural glare and sky glow. Public awareness seems to be the most fertile avenue to address excess light at night. Municipal officials aren't much help. The cost of urban lighting, the fixture installation, maintenance, and power isn't even questioned during budget meetings. But more citizens are beginning to complain about neighbors' light shining into their homes. They're noticing that poorly designed signage is hard to read, and it can even reduce visibility to the point that the glare creates a roadside hazard. So light pollution is light pollution just another brick in the wall for an environmental movement, or does it pose a significant challenge to humanity? Well, I guess you know my response. I think artificial light at night should be of concern for everyone, not just astronomers. The, res- the reasoning is quite simple, though perhaps so obvious that it goes unnoticed by even some environmentalists. And it's to be summarized in this quote: artificial light fundamentally changes the environment into one for which no life has evolved. As an astronomer for almost 60 years, I personally witnessed the change in the night environment, but now biologists have expanded these observations to include the impact on our health, specific species, and even more generally on the ecological balance. When we read about the extinction due to habitat loss, we must understand that one of these causes of this loss is the loss of the night. Animals schedule their activity around the light of the full moon, and the light from a distant city can illuminate the countryside brighter than the full moon. Foraging animals become more visible to predators. As a result, animals aren't necessarily dumb. They know this, so they respond by curtailing their foraging. They go on a diet. But unlike the moon, light pollution doesn't provide a dark time of the month for them to recover. We must remember that life on Earth has evolved and adapted to to and they actually exploit the dark night, the day-night contrast, stars for navigation during foraging and migration. The dark The darkness triggers the ebb and flow of hormones that rejuvenate biological systems, that fight infection, cure disease, repairs damaged tissue. And dark nights cue the mental processes that organizes information and experiences, resulting in improved memory, reduced stress, lower anxiety, reduce symptoms of dementia, among other things. And dark nights help reduce blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and other ailments that are now increasing in our society. So when it comes to the benefits of LED lighting in reducing light pollution, it would seem to be a slam dunk. And then comes the reducing artificial light at night. That's also rather obvious. There's lots to love about LEDs. But then Jevons paradox enters the picture. The long-term biological and ecological benefits fade into the back of our minds as we are overwhelmed by the glitz and splash of copious light throughout the night. Most of the health and environmental impacts of artificial light at night are easily reduced once we accept that more is not better. The four mantras of the Dark Sky International.org say it all. Only use light when you need it. Only light what you need to be lit. Only use as much light as you need, and minimize the use of white light, warm white or amber. Well, this is try to put a lot of information in this. I think I've crowded several potential talks into one. I've explained why we want light at night, how we make light, why we're making so much light at night, and its impact on the ecosystem. And to reduce its impact on the health, on human health and the environment, we need to reduce our homocentric view of the world. Now, there's lots of information about this topic. However, it's very difficult to get unless you have access to an academic library. Most of the information that is available on the internet tends to be quite vague and very general and also repetitious. We've this led to the generation of the writing of a book, which is for the IUCN. It's written by in part of our we're part of the IUCN, of the Dark Sky Advisory Group, and we put together what should be a guideline for all protected areas throughout the world. And the link for that is on the screen here. I thank you for listening. I know I've been went over some topics very quickly, so I really hope that it's keyed some ideas and questions in your mind, and I'm quite happy to answer questions to almost any detail. If I can't answer them, then I'll be quite clear about it and direct you to some other paper. Look forward to hearing your question.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. Very, very interesting presentation in a variety of dimensions. I would like to ask all of the people on this webinar to post their question in the chat, if they would, please. And we'll begin with me asking the first question. I was just thinking as you were coming to your conclusion, the astronomical community, have the astronomers, those who deal with the night sky, have they bought into this initiative to see lighting reduced in various territories where we, both in general purposes, lighting in general, but also in basically reserves where there's observatories and parks and so on? Over to you on that question.
Yeah, it's something. When we created the Dark Sky Preserve, there were questions about that. Why should we do this? Because it's not fair to essentially only protect certain areas from light. Shouldn't it be a social, cultural matter? And of course, they're quite right. But what we wanted to do is try to preserve at least some areas so people could see what it's like to have a dark sky. But it does pose as a bit of a problem, these dark sky preserves, because uh, they tend to be in provincial or federal parks, and the superintendents for these parks, they come and go, And so after about 2 years, the park staff don't even realize that they are a dark sky preserve, and we have to continually go back and remind them. And unfortunately, dark skies may no longer be a priority for the next superintendent. So we've had some troubles with that. Also, in this, what I've been talking about is visible light. But there's another, but if you extend that into across the electromagnetic spectrum, there's another form of electromagnetic pollution, and that's radio waves. As because radio telescopes are incredibly sensitive, and you have a satellite transmitting, passing through the beam, you can saturate those the receiver and the amplifiers, even though they're well outside the reception band or the band of the receiver. There's enough the radio telescopes are so sensitive that they can magnify that and saturate things. It it's what's occurred now, especially with these constellation satellites, is communication between astronomers and the operators, and they're giving a heads up as to the astronomers now know what the orbits are, and they can perhaps turn off or filter out any sense of the emissions if they happen to go through the beam, or they can schedule their observations so that the satellites are no longer aren't in the way. But that's getting to be very difficult because of the literally thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit and the many more thousands that are planned. It's going to be very awkward. Those satellites also reflect sunlight, and I know SpaceX is doing the best they can to reduce that reflection, so you don't have all these uh, bright satellites going through a very sensitive photographic field. But it's again, this is a homocentric wish to have internet all over the world, and astronomers just don't have the political clout or the money to be able to protect their turf.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now turn to some of the questions and comments. I'll ask Paul Beckwith to step up first, and Art Hunter on deck. Over to you, Paul.
Uh, yeah, great presentation. A lot of stuff covered. I love the physics aspects of the light and so on, having a laser physics background. So a lot of my friends don't drive at night anymore. They complain that the headlights on cars are a lot brighter than they used to be, especially on like F-150 trucks, things like that, where they're higher up and they're LEDs and they are bluish, and they're very, very annoying, almost blinding. And this is a huge risk of danger. And I don't think the regulators have kept up with the technologies of lighting on cars. So it's becoming a huge risk to anybody driving on highways at night, for example, unless they're divided highways, separate lanes. But if somebody's coming, closing speed of 200 plus kilometers an hour, or often these roads are 80 kilometers, people drive 100, so it's 200-kilometer-an-hour closing speed at night, and you're blinded just before the car arrives, and it's a huge risk. So have you looked at this? I don't know if you covered car headlights at all in the talk, but I think it's a very pressing problem that regulators just are not keeping up with the technology and the proliferation of these cars.
No, I didn't cover it in the talk. Want to leave a lot of openings for people to ask questions, but we were looking at this back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. We sent letters to the Minister of Department of Transport and Ontario and the federal government as well. And we didn't hear anything from the federal government. But for the provincial government, we got a letter back, form letter. I wasn't expecting more than that, saying that with all the gobbledygook of, very concerned about all this, and we're keeping our eye on what's going on. That doesn't do anything. The regulations themselves do not cover the brightness of lights. There's a minimum brightness, but like the lighting guidelines that the cities use, They're from the Illumination Engineering Society, and they give the minimum light of for roadways, but they don't give the maximum light. And what usually happens are municipalities, they add margins to that, so you can literally have much brighter lights. I did a study of Carling Avenue when they went from high pressure sodium, full cutoff high pressure sodium. They're very good lights, and then over a weekend they replaced them with LEDs. And the when I compared the results, the LEDs, the illumination from the LEDs was 2.7 times higher than they were with the high pressure sodium. Now, and they look far brighter than that, and that's because they were white. This gets to your point about the color of the headlights. The most lights now are LEDs because they last a lot longer than an incandescent bulb. So you have that blue light leaking through the phosphor, and when the more blue light that leaks through the phosphor, the cooler the phosphor will be, because the conversion of the phosphor from the white light into amber heats up the phosphor and reduces the phosphorus life. So you'd like to have as little phosphor as possible, and that results in these very white, very, very bright white lights. The brightness comes because your eye is particularly sensitive to blue light. Now, we only have 6% cones, blue sensitive cones, but our scotopic vision, our rods are more sensitive to blue light than our cones, and you literally saturate your rods. Now, another aspect are these twilight detectors, because they're also sensitive to blue. In fact, they're very sensitive. Their peak sensitivity is right about royal blue, where the LED emitters are located. So the blue light that leaks out past the phosphor triggers your twilight detectors, or the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Those cells do a number of things. They don't just keep you alert, but they also control the iris in your eye. So when that light floods into the eye and illuminates those cells, the cells tell your eye to to close
Change the
down your
aspect.
iris. And
Hmm.
it does, and if you've ever had a bright light shine in your eye, you get a bit of a pain in your eye, and that's because of the muscles in the iris pulling as much as it can to tighten down that iris as far as it can go. So when you see this blue light coming at you, your iris closes down. You feel that pain, and that's the way lights are. And there's absolutely no regulation as to what the color temperature of car headlights should be.
Mm. Thank you. A quick follow-up. I
There's
know.
one restriction for your amber lights. There's a very
Okay.
tight specification for that.
Hmm. A
Uh,
quick follow-up, very related to the same question is, so I know there's different types of sunglasses that you can get, and there's different types of optical glasses that filter out specifically UV, which people can wear at night to get rid of the glare. I don't know if you've investigated what glasses are you would recommend for this sort of thing. Sunglasses, if they're built incorrectly, can actually harm your eyes, because if they block out the visible frequencies but let UV coming in, that can damage your eyes. And of course, with ozone reduction, we're being exposed to more and more UV on the surface of the planet. So that's all related. So anyway, fascinating talk again. If there's some glasses or mitigation methods that people can do to protect their eyes against these things, let us know. Again, I missed the beginning, so you may have covered these things. But great talk. Thank you.
Look, look, here's a material that you can actually get. See, you can get sunglasses or glasses that have an amber color, only let amber light through, and that would be fine. It cuts out the blue. However, the blue light from the talk, the blue light keeps you alert. So it's if you're not driving much, then amber sunglasses would probably be better, would be helpful to reduce that intense glare. But if you're doing a long trip, then you want to have some blue light shining in to keep you awake.
Right.
All right.
Thank you, Rob. Art, over to you, and on deck will be Claude.
Yeah, excellent talk. This reminds me of something that we addressed here, at least in our neighborhood, about 20 years ago, and I assume the technology's advanced a bit since then. But there was at that time some LED light bulbs you could buy that were, as I recall, they were advertised as being suitable for not attracting bugs at night and not interfering tremendously with raccoons and fox and the night creatures that creep around. I live in the suburbs, and so there are, in fact, still animals. We see them through the day, and I'm sure they're active at night as well. Now, my question really is, because this is a development, humans have moved into the habitation of these animals, and and the developer, of course, put a light on every driveway that comes on when the sun goes down, and there's no switch. I can't turn it off. And but I can put a motion detector in it that says if the ambient light is below whatever the trigger level is, and some motion is detected, like a vehicle approaching and coming in the driveway, then it can come on. It also has 4 sides to it. And what I did was I put aluminum foil on all 4 sides, but I just opened it up quite a bit on the side that looks out on the driveway, and not the other 3 directions. And that seems to work rather well. But my real question is, I mean, I'm just improvising, understanding a little bit of the problem. But my real question is, can I go and buy a light bulb, and what do I ask for? An LED light bulb for my driveway to help the creatures at night.
Now you can. I back in the about 15 years ago, I developed a light that literally now you can literally buy them in a grocery, in your hardware store, and the main trouble is the way that they are labeled on the box, because they come up with warm light and things like that. Warm light is the bare minimum you should be using. However, now you can get lights that literally are amber. They literally have only the phosphor on the LED absorbs all the blue light, or virtually all of it, all but within about 1%, and emits only amber light. Now these tend to be relatively bright, 60 equivalent incandescent watts, but still, and they tend to be relatively large ampules. They're the standard Edison socket and so on. So you can buy those. They're a little more expensive, but heck, they're LEDs. They're going to last a year or more. But when it comes to the bug lights, because my grandfather put up amber lights because that reduced the attraction of bugs. Those are the old incandescent type. Now you can still buy amber bug lights at Canadian Tire and Home Depot and so on. However, they are so bright that the intensity of the light is what attracts the bugs. It's no longer the wavelength. If you shield them and illuminate the ground only, then the low illumination or low radiance from the ground is what actually won't attract many bugs. But if you put the bulb up and it's not shielded, then the brightness alone, regardless of the spectrum, will attract the bugs. But fortunately, you can now buy these. At least you can buy the amber lights in hardware stores. And I haven't seen them in grocery stores, some of those aisles that have stuff in them that's got nothing to do with food. but at least they are becoming available. And another point is back in the beginning of the 2000s, when LED lights were out, they're all very high color temperature, 6,000, then down to 5,000, then down to 4,000 kelvins, now down to 3,000 kelvins. And now you're also getting 2,500 Kelvin lights, as well as amber street lights. There's a number of companies that produce amber street lights. So the whole thrust of the industry now is to lower the color temperature down with less and less and less blue light. And that's not because of government legislation, but rather that's just what people want. People don't want to have brain surgery lighting and institutional lighting on their streets. So they're going to lower color temperatures. So this is actually a time where the technology has been around for years, but now the marketing of the companies is now in line, or more in line, with reducing the impact on the environment. So this is actually a good time that you can actually buy these lights for $10 in a hardware store, rather than buying the lights for $300 that I made about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and just to follow up to that, I've been experimenting with these motion detector LED lights on stairways and hallways, and in the bathroom and in the kitchen, for when I get up in the middle of the night and I'm wandering around getting a cup of tea and what have you. And that way it's not turning on all the lights, and it's nowhere near as brilliant as the other LED lights. And they also have this wonderful characteristics that they only stay on for 20 seconds. Which means I never have to worry about turning them off. But they do have the ability to go to an amber light from a white light, and based on what you've just said, I'm going to reset those which I have just to go on amber, because I don't need much light. I just don't want to stub my toe and fall down the stairs and those things. I guess the downside with the motion detector is the dog wanders around at night too, so so there's a little downside. Anyway, just any comment on these motion detector lights that we can? I mean, I buy it off Amazon.
Yeah, that motion detection is actually best, because then because only humans want light. The animals don't like it. So don't have the lights on unless you're there. That's one thing. And you aim it and you can shield it and so on as you wish to
Yeah.
cover the areas that you want illuminated. It's interesting to know that they work well, because the ones I have are depend upon how bright the ambient area is. So they turn on after about 15-20 minutes after sunset. Don't have the motion detector version, but what is nice about when you have these around the house is that when you wake up in the middle of the night, and the older you get, the seems you wake up a lot more than when you're younger, going to the washroom, and you don't want to have a white light turn on, because that will start shutting down your nighttime processes. So there's amber light, which isn't detected, it isn't detected by these twilight detectors in your eye. At least you can see, but it doesn't affect your biology. So you actually stay half asleep when you're, at least biologically, when you go to the washroom and you get back. One of the customers I had, that senior citizen that bought one of my lights, she got back to me with a very wonderful comment saying it's easy on the eyes compared to other lights. And I find that that's a very appropriate comment. They're they don't they don't they don't they don't hurt your eyes. They're easy to observe, and you're not looking to read a legal document anyway. So why bother having a bright white light for that purpose? So it's nice to see that these lights in my house here, I use the light light triggering lights, and they just got these small amber Christmas tree light bulbs, and that those amber bulbs are the ones that actually have this phosphor in them, and it emits very little blue light. So that's great, and they're cheap and they last a long time. What's not to love?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Claude, over to you with Mark Tovey in the wing, and after Mark will be Anitra. Go ahead, Claude.
Okay, thank you, Robert. That was much more fascinating than I thought it was going to be, quite frankly. And I especially like the eye-brain connections. I was not expecting at all that kind of analysis, and I will re-watch to get some more details. My question, as one of the resident doomers, is quite loaded, actually. Could you speculate on the role of nightlights in a world in our near future where there are many dangerously hot days, ever-warming planet, remember, for the foreseeable future? What is an appropriate way to use light at night in a world where a substantial portion of people have become nocturnal?
When they become nocturnal, as I mentioned, there's actually very few people out and about at night. The people that are out at night, however, tend to be first responders and um, skip the dishes people, delivering food late at night. But it should be amber. Car car displays have white light in them, so that should be enough to keep drivers awake. Uh, but for the rest of the light, it should be amber. When it comes to having lights that dim or long strings of light on the road that turn off when there aren't any cars, that's a much more complicated system. And the lights themselves are relatively cheap, but they charge a great deal of money for the control system for these things. So I don't really see lights being turned on and off. However, cars do have headlights. And as a result of that, for example, in Europe, you've got lights that are dimmed down to about a quarter or less their earlier evening illumination levels. And it's fine. People in Europe don't get into that many accidents because of that. So I think in the future you'll find lights will be dimmed down so that after 10 o'clock or so you can dim down the lights to about a quarter, which means you're saving 75% of the energy. But also I think you'll find that the color temperature, and we've seen this over the last 15 years, going from a very high color temperature that's very glaring down to the point where they're, at least in Ottawa, they're now replacing some lights with they used to have high pressure sodium, then they introduced the high white, very bright white LED lights, and now they're replacing those and to lower and lower color temperatures. And even some of the roads, I think, of the main highway in Ottawa, they're now getting back to amber. They're replacing the LEDs with old white LEDs with the amber LEDs. So I think that's been the trend over the last 15 years. I think that's going to continue. Once these existing lights die, and the lights don't die, it's the power supplies that die. Once they replace those, I think you're going to find that overall the color temperature lights are going to continually get lower and lower and lower. And it's for some people that like the aesthetics of white light, they'll get upset. But I think the amber is the way it's going to be going. I don't think you'll have, and the most prevalent control system will be the dimming after dark, where you can go down to maybe 30%, 25% brightness. When I introduced my lights that allow dimming after dark, sorry, it turned on after sunset, and then after about 10:30 or so, it would dim down to whatever level you wanted. And what I have is they dim down to about 3% of the brightest level. So, and you can still navigate very easily because, as Art pointed out, you just don't want to stub your toe. You don't want to read a legal document, so you don't need the bright lights that we see now. And some people that want the white light, usually it's the law enforcement and people, they want the white light so they can detect the color of people's shirts, the color of cars in an incident. But when you get down to the level of a street, 10 lux or so, the color detection of your eye is not very good. So they say that you'll get much better color rendering. Well, your eye can't detect that. And unless you've got a pretty good color camera to be able to detect this, it doesn't matter what the brightness is. And even color cameras now are so sensitive, you can reduce the color brightness down to very low levels and you'll be fine. Astronomical cameras, you can now almost take a snapshot of a nebula. So it's so we don't need these bright lights anymore. But still, it's the people who I guess the old gray hairs that never learned this in school, they still want more light. More light is better. And I think as people retire, we're going to get to the point where in the future where you have lower light levels and they're going to be much more warmer light or close to amber.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
On the same topic, if I may, as chairing this session, uh, France, as you know, has used yellow lighting in the front on its headlights of vehicles for many years. Why did France choose to do that, and why have others not adopted it?
It's probably the trouble with using amber in the front light is that it gets close to the color of caution lights, your caution lights here. And so there's actually a requirement to have the amber lights on cars to be in a certain color space, and the white lights have to be well out of that. So you can tell that it's a white
Mm.
headlight, not an amber light. Similarly, the red the red lights, for example, they are also defined in a color space. But what is notable is that, or what's important to note is that a lot of these requirements are not based on current knowledge or current wisdom. They're based upon 1990s, 1980s, year 2000 even that's a pretty, a lot of things have changed since then. So and yet it's very difficult to change these requirements because it's almost a consensus you have to have before you can change something. So in a lot of cases, it's just that the requirements are so dated, we're just running on fumes. Well, until again, people retire and new people get in charge that view things differently than the old gray hairs do now.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I would like to now pass it over to Mark. Toby, Mark can't turn on his camera, so he'll speak to you, but he's in London, Ontario. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Rob, wonderful presentation. As a longtime member of the RESC, light pollution has been of interest to me for a long time, and your name has kept coming up in that context. And one of the things that I've heard, I mean, if I have this correctly, was that you had a role in increasing the use of full cutoff light fixtures at Carleton University. And I did my PhD at Carleton. So um, uh, after I had heard that, I actually went around Carleton taking photographs of as many full cutoff light fixtures as I could find on campus. So if my understanding is correct in terms of your role there or your knowledge of that, what was that journey like of getting an institution to improve their light pollution stance, and or what lessons did you learn in encouraging their use in that context? And well, has Carleton maintained light pollution standards as they once were?
Well, I haven't been on the campus for a number of years now, but I can tell you it was not a fun job. It wasn't a fun endeavor, because when
Mm,
you talked to the asset people, they said, "Oh, it's impossible," and then
mm.
they close the door before you can say, "Yeah, but," it's
Oh,
they close the
wow.
door. So you have to keep going back and talking to people, and the idea was that they have to have life because of the security. And say, "Yeah, but you don't have to shine it all over the place." I said, "Oh, yes, because you have to know it's there." So it wasn't a matter of safety, it's a matter of apparent safety. You have to have lots of light so people feel safe. And
Ah,
unfortunately, what happens is when you illuminate someone, for example, they're standing close to a bright light, you're so dazzled by light that you can't see into the shadows. So
mhm.
you're not safe, you're on display. And so you can literally have someone sizing you up from 50 feet away and you won't even know it. And they run into under the light dome or not into the patch of light, take your bag,
Mm.
punch you in the face, and then run off and you disappear. But that's not the way, but that makes sense. But that's not what's in their specification book. So they just wouldn't do it. Fortunately, I was teaching astronomy at Carleton at the time, and you just keep bringing this stuff up, and eventually the older people retired, and the newer people said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. We can save money because we can get a smaller light." And it got to the point where a large fixture that would emit, I say 100 watts, would cost you $300, and one that emits 50 watts would cost $75. So then it became a budget matter.
Ah.
And I think that's how it got in. Then they changed to LEDs, and it's interesting that the longer people delayed to get
Mhm.
LEDs, the better the products became. And then when they eventually did buy those lights, they actually worked rather well. The early LEDs, they were putting them into fixtures that were similar to those used for high pressure sodium. High
Mhm.
pressure sodium bulbs want to be hot, so they try to keep the heat inside. And even some manufacturers, they would have lights and they say this is the cooling space, they called it. And what it was an oven. So the LEDs were almost insulated from the outside, and they literally heated up. And the using the Arrhenius equation, you've got that's the failure. The rate of failure is a function of temperature, and it's a very sensitive function of temperature. So the higher the temperature of the semiconductor, they burn up very quickly. So the newer fixtures are much better designed thermally, mechanically. And so I think Carlton dragged their heels long enough that perhaps they started getting the good lights were available. And so that's
Ah.
sort of a strange way to approach things, but that's the way I think it worked out. But while I was there, I saw that they're going to full cutoff lighting, but
Mhm.
man, it was bright. And I think what you were seeing was probably after they got rid of the lights that I saw.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And a follow-up, if I may, you were talking about, for instance, their specifications, and also earlier on, you were mentioning the Illumination Engineering Society. What um, um, what are the challenges in doing upstream social marketing to organizations like the people who produce those specifications to try and not just change a single institution, but change the culture and the specs around how illumination is done?
I think the best thing to do is replace the
Ah.
people that are giving the advice.
Mm.
Because it's an emotional issue. It's not a rational issue. Now there's a lot of very good science behind the work that the IES do, and
Mhm.
even some of the in fact, I'd say a lot of the requirements are actually very good. And I zero in on one particular document, if you will, called RP8, and that's for the road lighting for roadways and pathways. And
Mm.
you read the document, and this surprised me. You read the document and you look at the illumination levels; they are actually quite reasonable. The
Mm.
only trouble is they don't, and so that's only, but they only quote the or advise on the brightness of the light. They don't tell about the color or the color temperature or the shielding. If you use
Ah.
amber and you shield it, it's about the same as my lights that are good for dark sky preserves.
Mm.
Now, it's a little
Wow.
brighter than what I would have liked. For example, a roadway, or sorry, a pathway might be illuminated to, say, 3 lux. You can read a map at
Mm.
about 2 lux. So these younger eyes can read a map at 1 lux. I need about 2 lux. But then this is in the same range. This is for a lot of people, and it's safe and so on to walk this path. It's about the same. So the ISNA, some of those requirements are actually not that bad. And they're certainly acceptable because they allow a range, but they put in the minimum. And unfortunately, then that's interpreted by lawyers, by asset managers say, oh, we better
Mhm.
double that, we better triple that. And that's where in Ottawa you've got Carling Avenue, which is a major collector street, being relamped to be almost 3 times what it was previously, and it's even more than their guide, more than the lighting specification or wide lighting guidelines that I helped negotiate with the city back in the 1990s. It
Mm.
just doesn't make sense. You just got to get people out of there, because I've talked to some people in the traffic or roadway and lighting people,
Mhm.
and they're completely closed off from anything you have to say. When I measured the roadway, he said, "You obviously don't know what you're talking about." And here I've done photometry on
Mm.
telescopes and
Gosh.
so on. I know what I'm talking about, and it's not good. Well, you don't
Mm.
understand. What don't I understand? You don't know anything about lighting, and so they just go on these diversions or the
Mhm.
deflection, and those people come and go, and you just have to bide your time until they're gone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Rob. This has just been a marvelous presentation. Really
Th-
very, very stimulating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Anitra, over to you, and Dave Doherty on deck.
Um, Thank you for a brilliant conversation about lights. I noticed, though, however, that you've left plants out in good part, and it seems to me it's important to acknowledge that plants are able to absorb and photosynthesize with the blue lights, with the amber lights, as well as the usual spectrum, including high amounts of red lights. And in these nature conservation areas, many of which I've been to in Canada and throughout the world, they don't seem to take into account that plants have a active photosynthesizing period during the day, and then they respire for the rest of the time when there isn't lights. And so they, in order to have security around whatever assets are there on the conservation areas, uh, centers for environment or their houses or whatever, they have full-time 24-hour lights, which must throw the whole ecosystem of the plants off completely. So I'm wondering if there were guidelines for the plant parts of the conservation areas, the nature conservation areas, where this was an important ecosystem that you have run into.
Yes. I think it comes down from my talks with Parks Canada and other conservation oriented organizations. The problem is between asset management and environment. Asset management said security, 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 and the environmental people, the environmentalists, and so on, they don't know much about light at all. So they say yes, sir. I guess there's a particular meeting when I was out at Parks Canada. Uh, I figured I'd have an ally with the environmental group, and they just didn't say anything, and they accept the floodlighting. But you're right, the plants, in fact, the group I'm in, the Canadian Scotobiology group, one of the founding members was a botanist, so he had some very good things to say. And when I started all this, he sort of opened my eyes to a lot of things. And we see LEDs being used in greenhouses, and but a healthy plant has evolved over the billions of, well, yeah, 3 billion, 4 billion years to accept the spectrum of the sun. And if you don't give it the spectrum of the sun, you're bound to be missing something. So what they end up, but however, by having metal halide lighting in a greenhouse is very expensive. A lot of power goes into that. And so what they want to do is replace those bulbs with specific LEDs that would emit at particular wavelengths. And the ones that I'm most it turns out that there's so many wavelengths, you might as well use a broadband light. However, when I was getting into it, it was the phytochrome and the cryptochrome, both ends of the spectrum, blue and in the red, that seem to be the most critical. And if you don't have any blue light, the cryptochrome doesn't think there's the way I was reading it, this is going back about 10, 15 years, uh, reduce the sensitivity or the response of the plant to the light, to any light. So and that was sensitive to the blue part of the spectrum. So if you didn't have any blue, the plants were relatively ignored any light you were emitting in the red part of the spectrum, but it was night anyway, so it didn't really matter. And yet you could then service the plants or whatever using amber light that doesn't emit any blue light, and yet you can see what you're doing. I tried to pitch this to the grow ops that out in Smiths Falls, and they didn't want to hear anything about it. But anyway, thought I'd get a contract out of it. But the amber light, especially PC amber or photo converted amber, that for example was using this stuff, you coat your lights with this, the plants will essentially ignore the light. And so, when you do have, the study was done back in, I think, 1926, where they had a control plant, and then they had various illumination levels late at night. And it was interesting to see the difference of the plants that had more or less of this light. The control light, it was a
Exactly.
standard plant. If you started shining light in the evening, then the difference in the plant development process became evident, because during the daytime the plant grew its trunk or its branches towards the sun, that because it had the sun to aim for. At night, and so that took a lot of energy. The production of leaves also takes a lot of energy, but what the plants did was, at daytime it grew the trunk, at nighttime it leafed out. So as a result of that, there was this division of energy that was able to be distributed throughout a 24-hour period. When you have bright light on, it doesn't do the leafing. So you end up getting a long spindly plant, tall spindly plant with very few leaves, and it doesn't survive very well. I don't know if that
Thank
answers the question,
Thank
but
you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anitra, for that question. And Dave, go ahead, and I'll put Andrew Welsh on deck.
Thanks, Peter. Very interesting talk, Robert. Thank you. I was wondering how useful illuminated road surfaces can be in terms of eliminating the need for overhead lights. I was once in Pakistan a number of years ago, and essentially most parts of the city where I was had absolutely no overhead lights at all. They only relied on the lights in the vehicles that were on the roadways, thousands of them.
yes, it's odd, isn't it? You've got car headlights. Why do you need more lights?
Mm.
Well, that's culture. We've had roadway lighting, and that's now part of what you have to have nowadays. And it's even in the IAS, Illumination Engineering Society handbook, how much to light, but they don't really question it too much, except that when they say when the traffic densities are very low, and that goes down to a car or so every minute or so, then you can get by without any lights whatsoever. And certainly in rural areas, it's legal to not have any lights. But it's also kind of it comes out of the oil and gas, or I guess the petrochemical industry. You've got a lot of asphalt coming out of that's essentially, it's a waste product, and now it's being used to cover streets. But asphalt only reflects, fresh asphalt reflects maybe 2% of the light or less. Old asphalt reflects maybe 4%, 6%. So 94% of the light you're shining down on the street is absorbed. So that means you need to have roughly 12 times the amount of light incident on the surface to get a certain illumination. And that's all. This was set up when when electricity was cheap, asphalt was cheap. If you want to, one of the things we recommend to parks in the guidelines for outdoor lighting for that's used in parks is to don't make an asphalt walkway. First of all, water puddles in it. So just have white gravel, say dolomite or something, or even just crushed stone. It reflects far more light. You can actually see it with the light of starlight. And also it drains, so you don't have water accumulating. So places that don't have, can't afford to put in lights, they do simple stuff like crushed gravel or ground, just the ordinary ground. And that is enough. When you shine your headlights on it, that's more than enough. The one trouble with headlights is that they tend to, especially very simplistic headlights, is that they illuminate right in front of the vehicle, and then it gets progressively fainter, of course, down the road. And that brightness in front of your car is actually enough to cause so much glare that you can't see beyond the illuminated portion just in front of your car. Modern high beams, it turns out, they throw the light further down so you can actually see better, not necessarily because the light is shining further down the road, but you don't have that glare spot right in front of your car. So I think with better optics, well, the LEDs in modern headlights are much easier to control, so you have less of this glare in front of the car. But that's one problem with the headlights that you don't have when you have overhead lighting. But you've got an enormous infrastructure cost for putting in overhead lighting, and for a very small period, and it's used almost very, very rarely is there a car going down the street that needs car goes down the street. So these lights are on all the time. And that's where the idea of maybe we should have the lights motion detector turned on. And that's not that has that has issues that it's uncomfortable for the driver, because the driver looks down and they don't see anything down the road, and suddenly the lights come up. It's distracting. But when it
Which
comes to headlights, we've been concerned about the brightness of headlights, the colors of headlights, and again, the legislation, the people that write the legislation aren't sensitive enough to it, or don't want to put their jobs in the line by making a radical change.
So I want to get, I may come back to that if I can, regarding when the lights come on in front of a car if it's time. But I was actually interested in illuminated road surfaces. For example, glow in the dark stripes and reflectors that are embedded in the road surface, that are much better than the actual white stripes that we typically have seen for many decades in North America. It seems to me that, by the way, if a car's coming down a road and a motion sensor is in front of it, it shouldn't turn on one light. It should probably turn on 2 or 3 lights in a row.
Mm-hmm. Like a boxcar filter.
Exactly. And they should stay on for, let's say, a minute, let the car go by, and that little pool of light, about 3 lights wide, would just move down the roadway with the car. Anyway, I'm much more interested in the idea of glow in the dark and reflectors on the roadway to get around the problem with asphalt that you raised.
Yes, and the reflection can be phosphorescent or just retroreflection. The 3M has a wonderful paint that is extremely good for retroreflection. I like the retroreflections, that reflectors that go in little divots they put in the center of the streets. One trouble with that in Canada is that when there's snow, there's nothing when there's snow on the ground. Of course, when there's snow on the ground, you don't see the lines anyway. But
and
the
way
retro,
more
you're right,
reflection. And there's
those
way more reflection, so you can see what's going on.
The paints are very expensive, and they're fairly durable, a couple of years, but you got to service this traffic lights. You have to service the overhead lighting every year, or you should every year anyway. But it's a different. One is maintenance, the other is infrastructure, and I don't think those two groups in the bureaucracy talk to each other. They should. Maybe they're doing that more now than they used to. But I think it's a matter of making it simple, and the perception, again, and maybe it's all perception on behalf of the managers, that one is better than the other. It might cost a few dollars more up front. It may not. It might save more. It may cost more to maintain a longer term. But what is it you are actually trying to do? Are you trying to delineate the road, or are you trying to light the road? And then normally they just opt in. We have to light, as opposed to, well, what you want to do is delineate the road. What's the easiest way? And the paint is simple. I mean, when we're talking to parks, we suggest that instead of, if they've got asphalt paths, then paint the edge of the path with white paint, and that can be done by a high school student. So I mean, it's pretty simple. It gives the students some work to do, and it lasts for a number of years. I do this on rocks around my cottage. I paint the edge of the rocks to show where they are, the rock steps. So all this is very simple, but it's the mindset of the manager. It's got to be done professionally and not practically. And I think some of the practical aspects might be getting short shift.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, well, over to you, Andrew, for the last question at this stage of the session. And then after the question is done, I'd ask you to thank our speaker, if you would. So go ahead, Andrew, your question, please.
Will do. Will do. I very much appreciate the talk. I will talk more about that in a second. I also appreciate the fact that the technology has changed so much. I'm somebody who lives in the old technology. My car has a GPS that every time I turn on the headlights, the GPS goes near black, thinking it's nighttime and I'll be easier to read it. But of course, if it's fog and I turn on the lights, I don't know where the hell I'm going. And in a similar line, the question I had was that maybe my LEDs are a little out of date, because when I put LEDs on a dimmer, as I understand it, LEDs are either on or off. And the way they solved that with dimmers was they just rapidly turn on and off, and less so when I want lower level of lighting. But of course, this rapid turning on and off produces a noise pollution. Are my lights just out of date, or is this a nature of the current technology?
They're probably out of date.
Okay.
The drivers, the electronic drivers, typically, one trouble with the dimming that people found was the lights would actually flicker. And for that, the turning off, on and off, to dim the lights, that's called pulse width modulation. And in the past, they would just use a 60 cycle, and they cut out, a bit of the positive or negative going realm, but that gave you a flashing of 30 hertz, which was easy to see. Then they moved that up to maybe 120 hertz, and now there's a tiny little chip that'll do it at 500 hertz. My lights, we use 500 hertz, and I can't, when I'm dimming, no matter what level I'm dimmed to, I can't see the flashing. And there's no reason really not to go to a higher frequency as well. But when it comes to the there's another problem with the pulse width modification, or the basing the dimming on a electronic circuit, and that is when the circuit starts to fail. And sometimes you see even light bulbs in your home, you'll see that they're starting to pulsate, and that means the power supply in the light bulb is failing. So so when you mentioned about some of the when you have an RF problem, in terms of you pick the rattiness up on your radio, that's probably just a badly
Oh no, I actually hear it.
shielded power supply. There should be none of that in modern circuits. It's a simple thing to fix, and unless you're trying to try to save pennies in a $10 item, it shouldn't be a problem at all.
Great. Okay, so for the people who are watching both live and on YouTube,
It is my great pleasure as the chair of the CACOR to thank the speaker and to also let you know that when this is done, we're going to go on with a live discussion back and forth with the speaker. So do join us live if you get that opportunity. You get a little more out of it. Two things I wanted to say about this presentation that really struck me. The first one was something that Claude said, but it had occurred to me too. I would highly recommend, this is such a great presentation, I would recommend renaming it. The idea of the proliferation of outdoor lighting, people go, okay, I know about that. I would call this the direct harm of our lighting. Let's get some people really engaged and coming on board to find out what this was all about, because that's what I was learning, things that I was definitely not expecting. The second thing I wanted to point out about the presentation was that you had a line in there that I think we can extract to just about everything we do at CACOR, and that was artificial light at night fundamentally changes the environment into one for which no life has evolved. We could talk about that in terms of toxic pollution. We could talk about that in terms of fossil fuel usage. Fundamentally changes the environment into one for which no life has evolved. I think there's a huge message in there. So this is the kind of message that we explore once a week when we put out these videos. If you would like to find out more about CACOR, we really encourage you to share this video with families, friends, and acquaintances, as it says on the slide, and also to find out about possibly joining. We have another level of membership now. It's not just the full membership. We have associate memberships as well, which means you're notified of all of the great things we're doing, that are including things like this talk and other presentations. Just go to the website at CanadianCor.com. The link is shown there on your screen. Check out all of the amazing resources there, talks like this, other videos on YouTube, papers, essays, and things that are going to come straight into your inbox. Check it out. Thanks so much.
Thank